This is Bear With Us podcast.
Can we add girl? I mean, we aren't all manly like you.
Okay. How's this? This is Bear With Us, girl.
No. More like girl. Like a glitter bear.
This is Bear With Us, girl.
Perfect. This is Bear With Us, girl, where we stir the honeypot with hot topics, body issues, the adult industry.
Fashion, news, pop culture, pup culture, and more.
From the bear perspective.
For and by the community.
I can barely stand it. Get it?
You're unbearable. I feel like for season 2, I'm going to force us to record a new one.
Why?
Because now I can't keep listening to that same one every single episode.
No, I love it. It's like the story of our lives. And you know, I've incorporated wah-wah into like everything I've said. Even when I text friends, I do wah-wah, and they're like, I know how this sounds because they listen to the show.
That's funny.
Yes. I have to know creatively because you are so creative in so many different areas, you know, through your art that you do, but also in the stuff that you film. And now with the podcast, how has the podcast kind of changed your like creative outlook on other things?
I mean, I would say it's one of the first ones where I've done more so a collaboration. Because like this podcast is, I think of it as ours.
Yeah, of course.
Like I don't think of it as like Teddy Bear's podcast.
Well, we couldn't be more different if we tried to.
But no, like, and I'm so used to every project I do, like from like my T-shirt line to my OnlyFans thing. It's I'm in control of everything, and this is one of the first things I've learned to start stepping back and working and trusting someone else. So it's actually very new for me, and I've been enjoying it. And I usually don't like doing group projects.
I am exactly the same. Like, you know, when we were in high school and all that, when they would have you do projects, I would be the one to be like, just
let me do it on my own.
Yeah, let me just do it all, and it's gonna be amazing. We'll get an A+, whatever, and just don't talk to me, don't whatever. Or when you have to do icebreakers for like any news situation. Like I was called in for a jury once. It was so traumatizing because I couldn't fathom the idea of having to work with these people to like see if somebody's guilty or not guilty. It gave me such anxiety. But I think that's kind of like what we're going to be talking about today is kind of like giving yourself over to a process that can actually help and improve you.
Yeah.
Which I'm not used to doing in any other aspect of my life. So I'm very excited. But I find myself during the week, I'm like, oh, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. Such as, little hot topic, RuPaul Drag Race has cast the first straight man in drag, and all the gays went crazy.
I have a lot of opinions on that, and it went from it's changed. So it went from first I was like, fuck this, fuck him, fuck all that, to then it changed to no, I'm not going to attack him because his drag is still valid and it's not his fault that he's on the TV show. So now I stand with I'm mad at the producers in the show for casting him because, example, if this had been Dragula, it would have been fine because Dragula from season 1 has been inclusive with everybody from trans, non-binary, drag kings, that for them to have a straight person would be fine. Drag Race, however, has taken so long just to even acknowledge trans artists, and now that they're finally allowing them on the show, they want to instantly go into lumping in, okay, now like a straight white male can be on here too. And I'm just like, no. Slow down, give them their spotlight first, and then the next step you should have done would be to allow a drag king before allowing a straight white male who's had everything their whole lives, yet again, to be like, you just have it easy.
Okay, so my initial reaction when the gays were very upset is I got mad at the gays because Drag Race has taken so long to evolve. How exciting now that it's like on the fast track. P.S. Since when did drag ever have to do with who you're sleeping with? That's not my business. So the fact that a straight man doing drag...
Well, no, historically, it has had to do with who you were sleeping with because it has been part of the queer community, because it has been an expression and part of our community for basically our outlets and our form of safety where we go to. So, for example, him being a straight person to be able to do that, which is great, and he is allowed to do it.
It's his art.
But at the end of the day, he can take off all of those clothes and still get to be a straight person. A gay person, a trans person, a person of color cannot take off being gay. They're still going to be known as that and still literally risking their life to do their art that, for example, on Drag Race, which has now become the show that will change your career and change your life, He took the spot of what could have been another queer person's spot to have saved their life. And that's why it bothers me, because he is taking the spot of somebody that could be in our community. And I don't think that he shouldn't be there, but I don't think that he needs to be there now.
I do love that perspective, because that is a very huge part of it. And that is why a large part of our community is hurt. From where I'm coming from is the headlines hit everywhere. It didn't just hit our LGBTQ media outlets. This was written about in other outlets because there's a straight man there. So the whole drag story, the Drag Race show, is now in households that were never having anything to do with drag. And so it could save the life of some kid growing up in a very straight household, because now a straight man is now involved in our world, and they're seeing that it's not threatening. It is normal, so to speak. And so the story is being now told in more households than just another cast of our LGBTQ community. And that's where I'm coming from. Remember when Scarlett Johansson was cast as a trans man, which she has since gone back, but that movie never got made. And that movie probably would have gotten an Academy Award, whatever, and it would have been in a lot of mainstream households just talking about the subject. And now the movie's not made, that subject is not being talked about.
I get what you're saying, but also the same point, that's giving in and basically saying, yet again, we need to hetero whitewash and like make it safe for heteros to be accepted. And like I'm just sick of always trying to make them feel comfortable, make them feel safe. I don't care about you feeling safe, because you've been safe your whole life.
And I'm not saying that I'm focusing on him, which I think he's an artist and that's how he's displaying his art, but that's another subject. But the fact that other people are going to see this story because he is straight has nothing to do with him. But I'm focusing on, like I said, that gay kid who they're not in his household growing up are not even talking about gay, drag queen, sexuality, any of that. But now they are, because there's a straight man in the headline.
I mean, maybe, but I don't see it as deep as that, because at the end of the day, producers just did it because they knew all of us would be.
It's a TV show, of course.
They did it because all of us will be mad. More than likely, he's probably going home episode 3, and they did this solely just for headlines.
But now that he is on the show, because a lot of the gay community is like, I hope he gets kicked off first episode. It's like, well, no, that's not the right energy either.
And to be honest, he won't be kicked off first episode, because he is still actually good.
Well, and he's good TV because we're talking about it.
Yeah.
And whatever we talk about is amazing.
But like, I just don't care about his sob story. Like, I don't want to hear a straight guy talk about like how hard it is drinking a beer and then putting on a wig. Like, I don't care.
Well, it's hard putting on a wig after a few vodkas, too. I'll tell you that
exactly.
much. Anyway, let's get to our show today. This is kind of a different show for us.
I know. We're getting deep today.
Yeah. Just real quickly, huge shout out to our sponsors, cybersocket.com, and, of course, our media partner, Bear World Magazine. But this guest actually comes to us via you. So if you want to introduce our fabulous guest.
I do. Our guest is Jeff Samek. Is this founding practitioner, president, and CEO of MindfulSpace Consulting. For 15 years, he has created customized training solutions that, when trained and coached with consistency, adopting a mindfulness program can transform people's lives, personally and professionally. MindfulSpace has a mission to help everyday people, leaders, and organizations understand that well-being can be trained, coached, and sustainably supported by mindfulness practices.
Please welcome Jeff. And Jeff has shown us his guns, by the way. Boom, boom. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is quite a pleasure. This is something new for me. So, and it's also very, very fun to see Michael this way, so thank you for having me.
Well, I have to tell you, this is a very different subject. I'm usually talking, about drag queens and celebrities and drinking and sex. But this, Teddy Bear, this is a very important part of your life and something that you ascribe to.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, it's so foreign to me. Number one, being raised in a Latin household, you never talked about your mental health. You never dealt with anything like that. Then you move to West Hollywood, and it's like party every night, be famous, whatever that means. And it's like we're still not focused on what makes us us. So I'm very fascinated to know how you kind of came into this realm, how you and Jeff kind of work together.
Well, think about, too, like living in like West Hollywood, we're always taught to work on our health, like our fitness.
For looks.
And more often than not, completely forget about our mental health. Or we say things like for mental health, like I'm going to do a spa day. That's mental health. That's not mental health. That's bathing. Like, you should just do that in general. That's not mental health.
But that could also be part of what your routine is too, though, to pamper yourself.
Yes, but like, you need to do a little more in your life if you want more than just bathe.
Botox. I'm so in tune with myself.
Just mentally.
Meanwhile, you have
calms
like
me.
an eyebrow drooping, but okay.
No, like, I came to know Jeff during a time when, just career-wise, emotionally-wise, like, I just was not in a good place, and it came at a perfect time where it literally changed my life, and that everything we've worked on together, I've manifested into reality, like, even down to this podcast happening. You know, it's
what a joy to hear that.
and it's true. Like, I've put my life on track to where, like, I have a future that I'm excited about. And that's the one thing that I love that I've learned from him. And I try and help other people I know in my life to start doing the same things that I've learned, because I've seen how much it's changed my life.
Now, Jeff, how did you get into this kind of realm?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my story really starts with my own coming out and just really suffering a lot of anxiety, depression, and coming from a Catholic, working class white family in New Jersey, not really having those tools, not really having those skills outside of, typically understanding yourself or your spirituality outside of religion. And that just never really made a lot of sense to me to begin with. But also, anxiety and depression, we don't talk about those things. And my family certainly didn't. So, it was around, I was introduced to meditation really being diagnosed ADD as a young kid, and did some of that. But when I was about 20, 21, 22, I was really desperate. I was very depressed. I was not out. I didn't even really understand what being gay was. I didn't even understand that was a real thing. I remember, so I went to a therapist, and he asked, would you like to practice mindfulness in this very new kind of different way? And I started out the first time laying on the floor for like a minute. That's all I could meditate for, was just a minute, closing my eyes. I was that in a state of fight or flight and panic all the time. And so not even really understanding that was what was happening, and living my life that way. So, the beginning of my journey really was around my coming out and really finding out about my own mental health, my own mental illnesses, whether it became, out of anxiety or born out of panic disorder, which I deal a lot with and have learned to really cope with. And mindfulness really just transformed my life. So I was a young teacher, closeted teacher, teaching high school kids, 20 years old, and some of them are 18. And so there was just really that time in my life when it was finding myself. And this is when mindfulness came to me, the beginning through a therapist. And then I really, I just saw the power of sitting still and observing some of my nature, observing some of my thoughts, observing some of my attitudes and behaviors, and just the things that were coming up for me. So, really just became a little bit self-taught, and then left teaching and pursued a PhD in mindfulness to really develop best practices for people in everyday spaces. So my company and my approach is really just about best practices for everyday people. So whatever the doorway, whoever you are, whatever your background, and then really, trying to bring it to the community, after I did come out, and bring it to different populations of people that maybe were marginalized, that don't have access to things like this, because it is kind of a luxury, right? Often it's kind of a massage, or being able to get a personal trainer, a mindfulness coach isn't sort of an everyday thing. So that's really where I am now in my career, is really trying to give back, really work with certain kinds of people in different ways. And so haven't finished my PhD. I would like to be very clear about that, because I moved out here when I met my husband, and all but dissertation. So, but I still do that work, and a lot of research around that, and work with a lot of really great practitioners who taught me the way, and just try to pass that on. As Michael said, it's nice to hear Michael talk about just passing it on and trying to share that with people. So very appreciative to be here and share some of it with you all.
Well, I know on a mainstream level, a lot of celebrities over the last few years have really come out talking about depression and mental health. And we know during COVID, it affected everybody across the nation, across the globe. But it really affected, even in terms of suicide rates, members from the LGBTQ community, especially the trans community.
Absolutely.
Because we're still so resistant to talk about our mental health. We'll sit around at Sunday Fun Day brunch, and we'll talk about everybody else under the sun. We'll talk about their outfits. We'll talk about everything. We won't won't talk about our finances. We won't talk about our age. And we definitely won't talk about if we are in a depression or something. Why is the gay community so resistant to discussing this?
I think that the gay community for a very long time, and I don't think that, and not just straight people, I don't think regular, everyday masses of our population understand just how short the duration has been since gay rights was a palpable and very true way that we can live our life. Even marriage equality, yes, but even 10 years ago, I didn't even feel that I could come out. I didn't know what being gay was. So I think that I really do believe that it's because we've been so marginalized for so long. And so mental health has also been sort of a marginalized kind of under the rug. Nobody really talked about their mental health. So I think as mental health has emerged, well-being and wellness, and particularly mindfulness has emerged kind of concurrently with gay culture emerging. So I do think that there is a different attitude about it. But I think for so long, we coped with our pain and our stress by drinking, by probably a lot of us having sex and doing a lot of things that maybe just were ways to avoid that. And so that's what we joke about and have fun with and talk about at brunch. And, we kind of avoid and don't always want to talk about that. I think as time's going on and more people from different populations, and particularly in the gay culture, and more people who are gay talk about their mental health and talk about things like this, I do think it will create a change. But I do think it's because we've been so kind of under the radar for a long time, not having those normal rituals that straight people get to have, and not talking about things in the same intimate ways that straight people have for a very long time.
So I know that not all of our listeners may know what mindfulness actually means. Would you mind describing what it is?
Sure. And I always like to credit John Kabat-Zinn, who was the first CD. It was actually a CD that I got and I listened to that my therapist gave me.
What's a CD?
Right? Mindfulness is paying attention in the moment on purpose and without judgment. So it's really just when you get still, a lot of people think, and so that's my definition of mindfulness. Different people may have different definitions, but it's really paying attention on purpose in the moment, and most importantly, without judgment. So just really learning how to sit still and understand what's happening by observing. You become a witness. And so it's not, a lot of people think, I can't meditate. It's boring, or it's far too, I can't get quiet. I can't do that kind of thing. It's actually just sitting and observing what's happening. So often we don't even know what our thoughts are. We don't even know what our patterns are. We don't know the kinds of behaviors that we take on when we get anxious or we get paranoid or we get stressed out. And so that's the definition based on just really paying attention on purpose for little points throughout your day. Maybe you set a time in the morning, you set a time at night, and you just pay attention to what's happening in here. You pay attention to your heartbeat. Maybe some people do that. I pay attention to my breath. That's my practice, is breath practice. Yoga is a kind of mindfulness. People pay attention to the way their body moves as they're breathing and the different movements that they're taking on. So mindfulness kind of encompasses all of those practices, whether it be yoga, meditation, breath work, chanting, qigong, there's walking, journaling, all different kinds of things can be done mindfully. And mindfulness as an adjective is really just in the moment on purpose. So that would be my definition.
I have to tell you, Jeff, I'm from that school of what is meditation? Sitting there, breathing.
Why the fuck would I do that?
Ringing a bell. No, but that's, my personality is always frenetic. It's always doing something. And it's funny, we won't take 10 minutes out of our day to kind of sit and be because we think
we think we don't have time.
We don't have time, or that it's a waste of time. Yet we'll binge watch 8 episodes of Squid Game, which I did. But it's just funny because I have been told so many times that you could benefit just from 10 minutes a day. And I still haven't subscribed because I think if I'm sitting there, then I'm thinking about this email that I have to write. I'm thinking about, I could jump on this call, or I could go take a shower, or I could go do this.
Sure.
It's so funny that
Why would you choose to go do mindfulness, right? I mean, why would you choose to go sit there, right? And I think that's what is nice about mindfulness right now is it's getting a lot of acknowledgement, and a lot of people are talking about it in different ways. So it really is, setting that time for yourself, just like you would work out, just like you would take a shower, like Michael said, to bathe, just like you'd eat, just like you would do all kinds of things to take care of yourself. If you go, you get your Botox, or you go get your manicure, or you go do things to make yourself feel good. You also will take time to clear out your brain, and clearing out your brain is really, and all those filing cabinets is really just what what sitting and mindfulness, and particularly around meditation, that part of mindfulness is. So why would you choose it? Just 10 minutes a day. I mean, the research does say, 15 minutes a day, and typically actually, I should say 25 minutes a day is really the best. It's most ideal. But between 15 and 25, you can definitely get cumulative effects. And so if you start doing that for like 2 weeks to a month, and then a month turns into 2 and 3, all that progress becomes cumulative. So maybe for the next 6 months, you may have all those effects of that practice that you took on. So it's not just like I stop and nothing's happening. Like I can tell you this, my reservoirs, I can tell when they're up and when they're down. If I haven't meditated, in a few weeks, I can definitely tell. And if I start meditating again, 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes, 20, 25 minutes, typically an hour if I can, that cumulative effect will keep you resilient for a much longer period of time. So you'll feel those effects. Not to get too like scientific and nerdy, but if we don't do these kinds of practices, your brain clogs up with plaque, just like your body would if you're not working out or you're not taking care of yourself. So it's really just another form of taking care of yourself and really thinking about yourself in that kind of way.
Well, like I'll even like mention like when I first started seeing Jeff, like I saw him like once a week. It was for the first program was like for 8 weeks. And I would say for almost like the first 6 weeks, I saw no real results in my life. Because like it takes time. Like you have to keep doing it where you keep getting frustrated. You're like, I'm still not like I'm not quieting, I'm not breathing, I'm still in my head, I'm still in my head. And it's just the whole thing of just knowing that like it's gonna be okay that it's not working right away. Like like you said, it's cumulative. You're literally trying to work on your body, your mental health, which you haven't worked on since you were born. So give yourself a break that you're not going to be perfect right away. Like you're not going to be yogi, zen, 2 hours meditation first time you do it because you have.
Nor do you need to be.
Yeah.
Right.
No, exactly.
Not everybody needs to be that. And I'm not that. I don't take on that approach. And that's not, and to be frank about it, when you came to me, Teddy came to me through a friend, and his friend just said, hey, my friend is in a bad way right now. He's just kind of depressed and having some trouble with things. He wanted to buy him a few sessions, and I said no. I will touch up with your friend, and so that's how I work. Is different, people, different situations, what I'm willing to do and how I can work with people. But Teddy was in fight or flight at that time, right? Really, just not in a good space. So also hard for you probably at the time to see the progress you were making. I saw the progress you were making for sure. But Alexander, it's like if you go to the gym right away, like people aren't just like getting, super fit in like a week or 2 weeks, right? Typically it might take you like 6 months to really start feeling, or 3 months, 6 months, you start, wow, like I'm losing some weight. I'm starting to feel good. I'm getting my muscles. So I think it's that same approach, it's just seeing that longer term.
Well, and it's kind of having that, fight or flight. I'm the kind, like, I will start going to the gym and then I'll start losing weight and then I'll start to see progress. But then it's like, then I get bored with it. And then I always do this. Like, I just did it like 3 months ago. And then I haven't been to the gym now in like a month. And I was going almost every single day. And I was seeing that. And it's like self-sabotage.
Yeah.
That it's like, God, it was so there. And then I feel like I'm so far away from it now. It's like, well, I don't want to go back and like start all over again. But I know that I need to because life was so much better then. How do you get back on track, or how do you kind of stay on track, especially for somebody like me that, I'm doing something new every other month. I'm like, okay, shift gears.
You're a creative. You're an ADD or creative. You've got so many things on your plate. So, I think that it is important to find the right practice for you. I think it's good to find that right person or that right practice and just start off real gradual, real slow. For me, it's whatever the doorway. So like whatever the doorway. So however someone's coming to you, it's not having judgments about that. And it's not having it be this particular way. So for instance, I've been off my practice. I actually just said to my husband yesterday, I'm like, I need to wake up tomorrow very early and start my meditation practice again, because yes, I'm a practitioner, but I'm also a human, right? And so sometimes I fall off my routine. So it's really recommitting. And I think that some things that Michael has done that are kind of pivotal to keeping up with the practice is things like journaling. Things that maybe can sometimes in the beginning feel like chores. We do a gratitude practice, we do a body scan practice. So I do, as far as I understand, and I believe just from his progress that Michael will do things like that, and in his everyday life, right? So it's like stopping in the middle of a crowded space and maybe just taking, letting your shoulders relax, bringing them up to your ears and letting them fall, and then just kind of taking maybe 3 breaths, feeling your feet in the earth, and just kind of recentering in your everyday life when chaos is going on around you. So it doesn't always have to necessarily be that you're sitting, right? Sitting practice could be one thing you decide to do, but it really is. So it's working with the right person, deciding what's right for you. Michael's an artist, so we incorporated some artist stuff, and it really depends what you're going through, what kind of things you want. Sometimes we're manifesting some things that we want through that practice, or sometimes we're just doing a gratitude practice. Sometimes you're just sitting in quiet for like half an hour. So it really is, I think, diversifying, finding the right thing that interests you, and also being curious and being investigative about who you are. So maybe there's some things that you don't want to sit with, and that's the truth for a lot of us, and that holds us back from a lot of it is what happens when we do sit there. So I think it's about finding the right practitioner, and it's about committing to it, and realizing you're not going to do it every day for the rest of your life, right? You're going to fall off. There's going to be months where you don't do it. You're disappointed in yourself. You feel guilty, and then you find your way back.
This is just like a diet. Like it literally is.
Oh, yeah.
But if you think about it as a diet, you'll never succeed. You have to think of it
Mhm.
as a whole new way of life. And I kind of talking about we're right in the middle of the holidays, not just the Christmas season for whatever that means for you, but also the New Year's season. And a lot of people make resolutions. A lot of people look back at the year. A lot of people are going to get crazy on New Year's
Right.
Eve, and they're going to act up. It's this whole season that we're taught to act a certain way, or to participate with family in a certain way, or to make these resolutions for the new year, for the new us.
Yeah.
How does this kind of mindful thinking work into that, and how can it avoid us responding to some of the triggers that can depress a lot of us during the holidays?
Yeah, that's a great question. We all have our triggers. What mindfulness teaches you is how to identify those triggers. And I think having a new relationship to your triggers changes your life. That's what transforms. That's what changed. It's not that nothing has changed about the triggers are the triggers. When things happen, you choose your response. So mindfulness just gives you that maybe a couple seconds, a couple breaths to make a different decision or to think about it differently, have a different relationship to it. So a part of practice sometimes is we picture, emotions come up, thoughts come up, observe what they are, maybe give them a name. Noting is a big part of mindfulness practice. So objectively noting those things. You might say, oh, anxiety's here, and kind of give a half smile as you may be meditating and see anxiety arrive in you, and understanding how does it emerge in you? Where does anxiety, for me, anxiety always kind of starts in my throat, and then I get a stomach ache, and then I start to feel my jaw clench. So for me, that's how the more I acquaint myself with anxiety, the better I can deal with anxiety, the better I can befriend anxiety, because anxiety isn't necessarily a negative thing, right? It's not necessarily a negative impulse. It was a positive, it's a part of evolution. It's part of humanity. So especially around the holidays, when loneliness can be a big trigger for people. Togetherness can sometimes be a trigger for people, right? Especially I think in gay
Huge.
culture.
Yeah.
We don't always, we have communities, we have our own families, we have chosen families, but just sometimes the years that maybe we felt different, or we would go to these family Christmas events if we're in traditional families, Catholic families like I was, and kind of knowing you're different, that can be a trigger. Or maybe going out for New Year's and you're partying at a big dance party, a club and things. And so alcohol, just a kind of understanding how alcohol affects you and being a little more mindful about that. Just if you have a cigarette, you're out socializing, people have a cigarette, they don't typically maybe have a cigarette, and they do things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of understanding what you're putting in your body, understanding how it affects your body, because at that point you can make a decision about how you want to respond to whatever you're putting, the input that you've endured. So I think around the holidays it's especially important to also plan, know what you're going to do, think about it. Don't just say yes to everyone that requests something of you. There's a lot of requests made, a lot of obligations we make at the holidays.
Right.
Really thinking about what you want to do, thinking about who you want to be around, who makes you happy, and also thinking about and paying attention to what happens in your body when you're in certain situations, and just planning for that. So if you are going to go out, really just planning your escape route if you need, or knowing, that you're with safe people. Me and Michael often talk about, particularly in the gay world, it's hard to find good gay friends. And
Yes.
Mhm.
Especially
only
when you're
because the
in
pool is
entertainment too.
right. So I think it's all those things. It's really just taking into account, and Alexander, you might say, well, I don't practice mindfulness, so how would I even? And so I think it's just finding, a resource for yourself, right? Maybe this conversation has sparked in some listeners, a book, or they heard me say John Kabat-Zinn and they looked him up, or you go to my website and there's a couple things, resources there. It's whatever the doorway. So planning for your new year, not making a resolution with judgment that I have to do this, but really going in and saying, oh, mindfulness sounds like something that may benefit me. Let me take a look at that. And instead of making it a resolution, which is kind of surrounded with judgment, let it just be something that you are partaking in and seeing how it goes, without that judgment.
Now, but mindfulness is not just meditating, it's actually implementing other changes in your life.
I really believe, for me, mindfulness, the way I've studied it is really more it's about your brain and it's about attention. Where are you putting your attention? Mm-hmm. So when someone says, who are you paying attention to? Really think about that, because it is a form of collateral. Where are we paying attention, right? I mean, think about Facebook, think about social media. I mean, think about all these ways in which they've monetized attention.
Yeah.
And so think about where you put your attention. Think about what you are focusing on. And, Michael attests, a lot of the change and the subtleness of the mindfulness is really just having conversations and acknowledging with yourself, whether it be in quiet and solitude, in walking, people walk through a labyrinth, people garden, people sing, people do art, people journal, people write. So whatever your art form is important in expressing yourself, but it's also where you put your attention. Wherever you are putting your brain power is what is going to manifest. It's what's going to bloom. It's what's going to flower. It's just like in the rest of our world. Whatever we start trying to have grow is going to grow. So we want to be careful about where we put that attention, and we want to be very gentle with ourselves. We're stressed out human beings. Our life is full of trauma. We're psychological beings, in this 21st century, which is very, very different from, 40,000 years ago when we became, evolved and started standing upright and bipedal and just needed to run through the savannah and eat food and talk to each other, that kind of stuff. So it's just thinking of yourself as a psychological being that needs to take care of your emotional life as a very evolved being, and just taking on some subtle practices. And so if yoga is the way that gets you there, great. If song is the way that gets you there, maybe working with that. Art, I know for Michael, it's been art has been a part of his practice. And he may be able to speak a little bit more to how that's been. But for you, what are some of your hobbies, and how can you be a little more attentive to what the quality and essence of your behavior in those hobbies is?
Well, so I know like with you and I are very similar in that since we're doing so much, we're constantly always thinking like you're like, I don't have time to do this because I'm thinking what I have to do next.
Yeah.
Well, they always say anxiety comes, worrying about the future is where anxiety comes from. Thinking about the past is where depression comes from. So like for a mantra that like I tend to say, like say I'm just like walking in a room or something, I'll say in my head, slow down. And I'll purposely in that moment either just slow my walking down, slow my breathing down, slow my thinking down. Because when you get in that hyperventilation of, okay, I'm doing this project and this one, I know I need to email this person, I know I did this, did I contact that person? You just tell yourself, slow down. And it starts to calm yourself down so that you can then go back to those thoughts in a less fight or flight mode.
Well, and it's very interesting because I've been paying attention to a lot of entrepreneurs and what their success stories are and what they subscribe to or ascribe to. And a lot of them say, don't answer your emails until 11 a.m. until you've done your whole morning thing. Or it's okay for 2 hours a day. You put your cell phone in a drawer and you're not responding to people right away. We've got into this instant response. Mm-hmm. The minute I get a text, I get anxiety that I have to send back that text or I have to send that email. Unless it's a life or death situation, nobody's going to die. Like literally, right? And so if you don't answer an email to the end of the day, like it's going to be okay. But it's so hard for us to think because like Teddy, you and I have 4 different projects going on. And it's like, well, we want to move to the next step in all of those projects, but you can only move so far in a wide array. But there is that. It's like, get it done, or else it's never going to get done.
Well, it's from like a psychological standpoint. So like whenever your phone, you hear that sound, that ding, your body is now triggered, that you instantly, your cortisol goes up, everything spikes. You see the flash of your screen, so you get the color stimulations. Like, our phones are designed to do that. All apps are designed to do that. And it's sometimes you have to literally just put the phone away so that you're more present in the moment, because you have a device that is literally trained to pull you out of that moment.
Well, okay, like last night, for example, I never go to bed before midnight. And last night I was like, I'm exhausted. I'm going to go to bed. So I turned off the lights and everything at 10:45, and I had my phone in the nightstand, whatever. At 11:30 something, it vibrated because somebody had sent me a text. I knew it was a text, and I even put it in a drawer away, but I could still hear it. And I was so perfectly cuddly. Like, I hadn't been that cuddly and gotten in that perfect position in probably months. Like, I'm not even being dramatic. And I just felt so at peace and relaxed. But then on my mind, it was like, I wonder who texted me.
Maybe
If
it's
somebody
important.
texted me this late, then maybe it's important, or maybe it's one of my drunk friends, or maybe it's a hookup. I don't know. And then my mind was creating all these scenarios, and I just couldn't. It was like a movie. It was like, ugh. And then I threw off the blankets, and then I got my phone. Then I didn't go to bed till about 1:30 because then I started scrolling, and then I started emailing.
Well, let me ask you, was the message even important?
No, it wasn't.
Looks over.
It was somebody who had the answer all the time. But,
but think
I
about-
don't think it's ever been a life or death situation. The last one was probably 6 years, and it was actually about my grandma. But
Yeah.
But like, I hope you also look at that moment of think about like all those what if scenarios you had in your head and how it didn't happen.
yes,
And we almost tend to skip past and ignore those moments of when we're wrong. And now remember, like, you're not always right. So maybe if you're thinking this terrible situation in your head, it may not be true.
yeah. And my mom always says, don't worry about it until it's actually there to be worried for. What
Right.
if, like you said, what if? I think we do that even with relationships too, or even friendships. We're so worried about what's not even happening. And you brought up a really good point. Depression is when you're looking in the past, and the most depressed people I find, and I know this from my family, where manic depression just runs rampant, and some of the most horrible people in my life are from my family. They live in the past, and they will not get over the past. They will not evolve. They won't stop talking about the past. They'll talk about how amazing things were 20 years ago. It's like, well, okay, what about today? It's like, that's a very good point that you brought up. And also during the holidays, and Jeff, I want to know your opinion on this. We're taught to also challenge ourselves and to not run away from challenges. But there are certain times that maybe we just have to remove ourselves. Like my mom and I decided probably 6 years ago, we're not doing any more family holidays. It always ended up in horrible fights. We never had a good time. And, we kept trying to make something work that did not work. And it was affecting us physically and emotionally. And since then, we've had great holidays because we stopped that. But did I run away from a challenge of having to be in that kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we always do that to ourselves. I mean, we're more fear machines than we are. If happiness and subtleness and peacefulness were were the qualities of mind that were more, for whatever reason, attractive to our mind, and our brain would produce those feelings more often. So we're definitely more attuned to fear, and that's because of just the way we evolved, right? We evolved in a jungle, having to survive, and so often I just don't think people realize. We're 21st century people. We're living in 2021, but we're still in the jungle, and it's still fight or flight, and we still have that reptilian brain and the amygdala, and like Michael was saying, cortisol runs through your body when you're stressed, and the stress-induced hormones. So yeah, I think it's making us. I think mindfulness is about making choices, and so like getting out of your bed to get your phone. The way mindfulness for me works is it's really about just thinking, oh, look at that impulse of me needing to get that phone. What's that about? And then the next question is, well, where's that impulse coming from? Is that my need to know? Is that me needing, if you're thinking it's your hookup, is that me needing to feel attracted? If it's your mom, if you think it's your mom, or you think it's a friend, or what's the reasoning behind that? And then so the mindfulness is really just about observing, like, what's my impulse to go do that? And so when I see that impulse again, I become more familiar with it and acquainted with it. So of course it's our impulse to be with our family and be with our familiar tribe and our kin around the holidays, especially if you're Catholic. It's my background is
Mine
always, those obligations. And so mindfulness is just about stepping away from the obligation, saying, wait a minute, does this actually make me feel good? How does this make me feel? If I'm sitting there and I have to, do I even go and drink with friends, family, whoever it is around the holidays? Do I drink, consume alcohol, whatever else I'm consuming for fun? Or am I just like, not really enjoying my, like you talked about, or am I trying to avoid,
Well,
and so I think it's just that.
Well, and this happened so much during COVID where we didn't have to hang out with certain people because you had to stay
Right.
home. And so this whole circle of friends that you thought, oh, this is my circle of friends, just because you went out every night and got drunk or whatever, you didn't have to see them. Did you miss them? Did they even reach out? Did you even reach out? Did you improve? And I think a lot of us did find out who our friends really were because it wasn't just this obligation that we felt to be a cool kid to go out and
And we settle a lot as gay people, right? Because,
we do.
and I think that's an observation we can make about ourselves as a population. I mean, myself, I feel that way. Growing up gay, you often want to be, you want to be a part of being accepted. You want to be a part of
course.
the larger, so you'll put up with a lot of shit.
That's
And so I
exactly
think
right.
it's great to step back, and a part of my mindfulness practice has always consistently been about changing. But when you apply those boundaries and change those relationships, Michael and I have done some work recently around this, whether it's family, friends, people, not everyone's doing mindfulness. Not
Mhm.
everyone's putting boundaries. Not everyone's changing that. Alexander, you just changed the whole dynamic of the family Christmas dinner. Like, so you also have to be prepared with your attention and with your intention, right? To know that not everyone's where you are. And so you may also have made the good choice through mindfulness. Then you also have to try and use mindfulness and your attention and your understanding of yourself to understand how other people's reactions are going to come and not take it personal and not use that judgment. So
Yeah, that's the one thing that's hard is like when you start doing this and practicing this, you get pushback from some people in your life who like don't want to be positive or like work on themselves, and so you kind of it's hard because you have to just sometimes accept like they're not doing this, and like
Yeah.
I can't fault them. It just makes it hard sometimes.
Well, and you have those friends who only like you because they think that you're a certain way, and so when you try to better yourself, they
Yeah.
feel threatened
Yes.
because it's pointing a light on them. Like, hey, if I don't want to go out to the bar tonight, maybe we should go to the movies or do something different. Then they get all nervous. It's like, oh, this is gonna put a light on their drinking, or that
That's right.
you might find other friends. I went through this with my best friend, who was also my ex. We've been best friends for 18 years, and we were together for a long time. A lot of those memories were from our fun drunken nights, that those stories we could never replicate. But
Yeah.
he is now 7 years sober. When he
Wow.
first became sober, I thought that's the end of our friendship. His whole personality had changed because he had to step away from the night scene, which, looking back, I understand, and I should have been tons more supportive. But I was so threatened for our friendship and like all the memories that we had, and it was tumultuous for about a year that we were feeling each other out. Him as a sober man, me being threatened by that I wasn't supportive of his mindfulness and what he was going through. And looking back, our friendship is just as strong as it ever was without all the bullshit and the fights and the broken bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's different.
It's probably better.
Yeah, it's better, but it's totally different, and that's okay.
That's totally okay. And no judgment about the times when you were drinking and had a great time and had a lot of fun. And that's what I think is important that we don't forget when we do take on practices like mindfulness. It's not just about being that elitist yogi or that person who has all these judgments about other people. It's actually about being more human, more compassionate, more intentional, and more empathetic to people. And really just reaching out, like Michael was saying, sharing this with people, sharing your experience with people, not being a judgy person who's, oh, well, I've got it right. And sometimes when we get that stereotype of like sober is kind of interesting. It's a doorway in for a lot of people for mindfulness. But when people become sober and they've been your friend and you have a great time, it's like, oh, now
Yeah.
you're like the sober person who's going to judge me and all that. And so it is similar in that way with mindfulness. But any practice you take on, right? If you start like changing the way you live your life,
Yep.
you're changing the way you live your life.
Yeah. And it's scary. Like any type of change for me is scary. But, is it scary or just kind of staying along your route?
Well, like I know this from what I've practiced of him. The one thing that I've been dealing with lately is I almost feel some guilt because there's certain people in my life that I'm having issues with my relationship with them because my relationship with them was at its best, quote unquote, when I was negative and would talk about all the things I hated in life.
Negative people attract negative people. I mean,
But the problem is though, since I don't want to be that anymore, and I've worked so hard not to, I now don't have anything to talk about with this person, and it's hard trying to find a relationship when I'm like, there's nothing to talk about because the only thing you want to talk about is everything you hate in the world, and I just don't want to spend all day doing that.
That's tough.
Yeah, no, it's been
And
hard for me.
can it come around like my relationship with my best friend? It came around because our friendship was that important, so we did make it work. But there was that time that I thought, okay, well, this is done.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
It's hard. You have to commit to it and you have to return to it. And like I said, be very gentle with yourself, not have judgment, and just keep returning. That's all it is. And you know what Michael said I thought was really important just to note about the presence, the present moment is just about your breath brings you into that present moment. So if it's your breath, you know, for some people it's your heartbeat, for some people it's a chant or a saying. It's whatever brings you into your body, into your breath, and just giving you that moment of presence, because the only moment you ever have is this moment right here, and now this moment's gone. So anytime I can breathe through my nose and feel that presence through the moisture of the air through my nostrils and in my body and down into my belly, and I feel my belly expand. That's why the breath for me is my practice of mindfulness, brings me into that present moment. But whatever brings you into that present moment.
Well, I have to tell you, and you just doing that, like my shoulders literally slumped because I was doing it with
that.
you, and it's like, oh my god, I didn't realize like how high my shoulders were.
No, and it's honestly like out of everything I've practiced like with him, you know, like obviously we've done like more advanced things now, but like at the end of the day, it's the simple tricks that just like as simple as just literally throughout your day, just saying the words, okay, breathe, and just being like, oh wow, that made a difference. Or
but it's
slow
because you
down.
taught yourself how to breathe, Michael.
Yeah.
It's because now over this time of you've been practicing for like, what has it been, like a year now?
Yeah,
it's been a pretty long time.
Almost 2 years.
You taught yourself how to breathe, right? So in the beginning when you would say, take a breath, I'm sure that you weren't having those same kind of experience that you have now when you say that.
Yeah, because I wasn't paying attention to, like, you know, when I breathe now, I'll pay attention to, like, okay, I feel the cold air go in. I feel where it goes in my body. Now I'm paying attention to, I'm noticing, like you said, my shoulders are going down. I'm noticing the lights are getting a little brighter because I'm more in the moment. I'm less in my head. I'm actually listening to you as opposed to thinking in my head of, what do I say next? What do I say next?
I could talk about this forever because it's so fascinating to me because we never, like I said, sit and talk about it.
Well, we don't. Like, I mean, think about like this, like on our podcast, like we've talked about fun things like, you know, porn stars, bears, this, that. And then this is the podcast that like this episode is serious. And I'm sure people will be like, oh, this is more boring or this is that. No, this is important. This is how you get to enjoy everything else in life, is that you also work on this too.
Well, especially with us both being in entertainment, it's always the smoke and mirrors that we put forward, you know, because we have our brand, or people want, like, for my instance, they want Alexander the party guy or like the loud and jazz hands guy. It's like they don't realize like how many hours of work it takes to present that. And it's like, yeah, we have late nights, we have early mornings, we have chaos. But it's also valuing yourself. Like if you can take 25 minutes out of your day for yourself because you're worth it, then you're also going to challenge those around you to be like, hey, I'm worth you not treating me like crap, or I'm worth not being in your presence. I'm worth it, and sorry for you.
So that's what happened with me, is that the more time I started putting value in myself and finding that I was worth something, like I would tell myself, like, you matter, I started to not attract bad people in my life, because I would notice red flags right away. And as opposed to trying to make excuses for it, I would think, oh, I just genuinely don't want to be around you because I now enjoy being by myself. Like, I actually like being alone. I'm okay with my thoughts because I've now sat down on my thoughts. Like, I sat down and saw all of them, that I'm now not afraid to be with them. Even if they're, you know, quote unquote a negative one, it doesn't scare me anymore.
It's a great point. Neutrality, which is something I just want to tell people, is neutrality, neutrality, neutrality. Mindfulness is about neutral. Not about good or bad. It's not about, even anxiety, like I said, we put a bad spin on it because it caused us to suffer. But there's also this time in evolution when anxiety was great. It was our gift. Anxiety helped us. I have to eat. What do I go do to do that? So planning and all that. So, but even though you said, Alexander, 25, 1 minute a day, 2 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day. Start that way. Everyday people, just start with 1 minute. You know, you don't have to do 25 minutes. If you're ambitious and a go-getter, great. But whatever your doorway, you know, whatever makes you feel like you could sit there and you could take this practice on. So use YouTube, you know, use the internet, use social media, whatever makes you feel like you can take it on, right? And then when you stop taking it on, don't be harsh on yourself. You know, just return to it when you can, and it builds over time.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much. You know, I know I'm going to implement some of this in my life, but maybe some of our audience can get through the holidays, or maybe make this part of your New Year's resolution for a fresh start, and to kind of take a breath and also enjoy where we've come from too. I think we don't enjoy our successes as much as we should because we don't take the time.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. Before I go, I would just ask, would you please take a breath with me?
Sure. I tell you, if you had a video of that chest breathing in and out, I'd watch it all the time. Jeff, please.
I don't have social media anymore, so that's awesome.
Jeff, please tell our audience where they can find you.
Yeah, mindfulspaceconsulting.com. That's the place to find me, and please do. Please reach out if you have questions or if I can help you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and you can find me on Instagram at Mr. Teddy Bear Gurrrl.
And you can find me on Instagram at AlexanderIsOnAir, and I'm going to be breathing. Until next time, you guys, please show us some love. We are growing this podcast, so comment, rate, subscribe. All of our links are at Bear With Us Gurrrl, and that's 3 R's, but bearwithusgurrl.com, and you can always email us at bearwithusgurrl@gmail.com. And until next time.
Until next time.
Rawr.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
That has been another episode of Bear With Us, Gurrrl, presented by Bear World Magazine and Cybersocket.com.
Please take a moment to like, subscribe, comment, rate, all the love and support you can give, guys.
Questions, comments, and suggestions? Email us at bearwithusgurrl, 3 R's, @gmail.com.
Until next time, embrace the fur.
Grrr.